Hey everyone, Dr. Sharp here again. We're going to go over some of the expectations for the white paper assignment. So, let me go into student mode. You can see this assignment by clicking on assessments, going to assignments, and then going down to professional white papers. This is going to be due Sunday night. And what you're going to do is you're going to write a 3-page white paper that names and defines a specific problem, shows why the problem matters and who it affects. It presents research-based findings that help your audience understand the scope, causes, and consequence of the problem, and briefly points toward a feasible solution or direction. This is only going to be a small portion of the white paper because the problem proposal that you're going to write next week, you're going to give a more uh, full version of a solution. So, what you need to do is you need to find some kind of problem in your local community or in your current workplace or in a place that you're a customer. You want to define that. You want to do a little bit of research. So, we have to do two types of research. So, your first, you need one source that is primary research. So, this could be a survey, an interview, an observation, informal data collection, workplace document review, or official records. Now, since we're on a short timeline, I don't expect you to make a survey or an interview. It's totally fine to use your first person observations or informal data collection as your primary research. The reason that we have this in here is just to show that the problem has some specific kind of effect on people. And then you need to find two secondary research sources. The best way is going to be journal articles or credible news or industry sources. So, where you can find those. If you go into our library resources, you can do searches on Galileo. And let's say that you want to do something like a wait times at the doctor's office. You can go and find some sources that talk about this in some way. You would just search what you're looking for, wait times, and ER, and you'll find some kind of source that you can incorporate into your white paper. And you're using these sources to define the problem, shows who it affects, that sort of thing. And you just access these through the PDF or the full online text. So let's go back to the assignment prompt. Here are the structure. So it's going to be your title, your intro, your problem statement, evidence of an analysis of contributing factors, brief solution preview, conclusion, references. And then we have some style guides. We want to use clear, specific headings. We don't want to use technical language. We want to use active voice when possible. Remember, active voice is when the subject is in the position of doing the action. So active voice would say, um, I feed my dog. I am the subject. I'm feeding. It's active. The passive voice would be the dog is being fed by me. There, the subject of the sentence, the dog, is actually the receiver of the action. It's the thing being fed by me. So in professional writing, we want to use active voice. We want to avoid bias in our wording. And if we have any charts or visuals, make sure that it's representing the data truthfully and labeling figures clearly. Obviously, charts, data, they're a big part of professional writing, but they're not the main focus of this course. So those are optional. They're nice to have in, but you don't have to include charts and data. Here are the document design requirements. We've got 3 full pages, 11 or 12-point font, 1-inch margin, single spacing, left-aligned paragraphs. We'll look at what that looks like in a minute. We've got pages numbers. We've got our headings and subheadings. Remember, I've made the headings and subheadings for you up here. Then bulleted or numbered lists were helpful. And if you want, you can have one visual that clarifies the problem. And then I've got a checklist here that you can use while you're writing the white paper. So let's look at a couple of examples. So if we go back into our course, over here, and we go to the course homepage, you'll see that I've put 2 types of examples that we're going to review very quickly. So first, I wanted to give you examples of professional white papers. So these are the sorts of white papers that you would see if you went into a white collar workforce and had to write this kind of report. What's important here is not the content. I don't care if you know anything about the NIST cybersecurity framework. What I want you to see is how these are structured, right? We have our short paragraphs. Everything is left aligned. Everything is single space. We have our headings up at the top. We have our page numbers down at the bottom. We're using textual formatting to make this easy to read at a glance, right? We have one, we have bolded, we have bold, we have bold, we have links. You probably don't need to put any links, but you can see how these are constructed. So we have two examples here. They're using visuals. I don't expect you to use visuals on this assignment. You can see how we use bullet points to offset important things so that it's easy to see these important CSF functions at a glance. We've got govern, identify, protect, and so on. There are two examples here. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, toward the middle of the document, you can see our second example after we get through the appendices. We have another one from the Senate Committee on Finance. So this was written for our government. And you can see this one uses a lot less textual formatting and visuals, but it still contains what we know to be the genre conventions of our professional writing. Everything's left aligned, everything's single space. We have spaces between the paragraphs. Since this involves more research, they have footnotes. You don't need to do footnotes there. We'll do APA style for our citations. These, of course, can be a little overwhelming because they're very long, much longer than anything you could write in 1 week. So I've given you a white paper student example. So this is an actual student example. So they've got their executive summary here, and I kind of specifically don't want you to write an executive summary. Instead, we're just going to begin with the introduction, like it says in the assignment sheet. If we go back to the assignment sheet, you will wind up writing an executive summary for this white paper, but it's going to be done with AI next week. We're not going to focus on it this week. So you'll start with the introduction. You're going to have your problem definition, right? That's their problem statement. It should be the longest section. They say there are fleet shortages, undeliverable vehicles, and cleanliness issues. Next, we go over the impacts, which is their evidence and analysis of contributing factors. What is causing the problem? They've got their implementation roadmap. This is something you'll work on a little bit next week, but you can see this is much shorter, right? You can write a white paper in a concise way. This is a good example that you can use as you're thinking about stuff. This is actually a good example for the white paper and the problem proposal that we'll be working on next week. So when you're working on this white paper, just make sure you're following this structure. You want to explain what the situation is. You want to use your research to say what the problem is, how it's important, who it's affecting, what are the patterns, frequency, costs, risks, delays. You might not have that specific number, but you should have a general idea. You're going to see what causes the problem. You're going to give at least one plausible direction for improvement, and then you're going to summarize the problem and the urgency or priority level. So is this something that we need to fix? Absolutely. Is this a 6-month problem? Is this a 2-year problem? Try to be realistic there. Then I've got everything laid out with how you should write it. I think it's pretty clear, but you may have questions. I'm trying to make this one as clear as possible since I was a little confusing on the last assignment prompt. So that's what we're working on. If you have any questions, please just send me an email. I wanted you to have these examples so you can see what they look like. And I know this is the first really technical document you're writing in this class, so I'm going to be a little more lenient on this one in terms of grading in order to get you prepared to complete the problem statement that's going to be due next week in week 6. All right, good luck with the assignment.